While the world obsesses over America's political chaos and debt ceiling drama, something far more existential is happening across the Atlantic, and almost nobody's talking about it. Germany, Europe's economic engine, just posted 2 consecutive years of GDP contraction. France's deficit has blown past EU limits so badly they're considering emergency measures. Italy's youth unemployment sits at 21%. And here's the part that should terrify you. The median age in Europe is now 44 years old, compared to 38 in America. But that's not even the hidden reason. That's just the symptom everyone can see if they bother to look. The real story, the one being buried under headlines about Trump or AI or whatever distraction is trending, is about something far more structural. Something that was baked into Europe's post-war architecture from the very beginning, and it's now unraveling faster than the institutions can adapt. Let's start with what the mainstream narrative will tell you. Europe is struggling because of energy shocks from the Ukraine war, because of aging demographics, because of slow productivity growth. All true, all documented. Germany's industrial base, the backbone of European manufacturing, has been gutted by skyrocketing energy costs after cutting itself off from Russian natural gas. BASF, one of the world's largest chemical companies, is now shifting production to China. Not expanding there, relocating there. Volkswagen is closing factories on German soil for the first time in its 87-year history. France just raised its retirement age and nearly sparked a revolution. Italy's government debt is 144% of GDP, higher than it was during the Eurozone crisis. Spain's banking sector never fully recovered from 2008, it just learned to hide the rot better. Meanwhile, the European Central Bank is trapped. Inflation, they raised rates. Economic stagnation, they can't cut fast enough without triggering capital flight. The euro, designed to unify the continent economically, has instead created a monetary straitjacket where Germany and Greece wear the same currency but live in completely different economic realities. You already knew some of this. Here's where it gets darker. Europe isn't just aging, it's aging faster than any civilization in human history outside of Japan. And unlike Japan, Europe tried to solve this with mass immigration. That created a different crisis entirely. By 2030, 1 in 4 Europeans will be over 65. The dependency ratio, the number of retirees per working age adult, is becoming unsustainable. Pension systems across the continent were designed when people lived to 70 and retired at 65. Now they're living to 85, and the math has imploded. But here's the hidden dynamic within the demographic collapse. Europe's fertility rate isn't just low, it's selective. Native-born Europeans in countries like Italy, Spain, and Germany are having 1.2 to 1.4 children per woman. Meanwhile, immigrant populations have higher birth rates but face integration barriers that prevent full economic participation. The result? A workforce crisis and a social cohesion crisis happening simultaneously. Sweden, once held up as the model of successful social democracy, now has neighborhoods where police need military-style escorts. France has banlieues where the French state effectively doesn't govern. Germany's AfD party, once fringe, is now polling second nationally. This isn't a moral judgment, it's a pattern recognition exercise. When you import millions of people to solve a labor shortage but can't economically or culturally integrate them at scale, you don't solve the demographic problem. You fragment your society while the demographic crisis continues underneath. And here's what nobody wants to say out loud. The American model, messy as it is, has worked better. The US attracts high-skilled immigrants who integrate into the economy faster, has a younger population, and maintains a fertility rate closer to replacement level. Europe's immigration has been higher volume, lower skill on average, and concentrated in welfare states that were never designed for this kind of rapid demographic transformation. Now we get to the structural rot. The European Union was built on a beautiful idea: never again. Never again would European nations slaughter each other in industrial wars, pool sovereignty, integrate economies, make war materially impossible through mutual dependence. It worked. Europe had 70 years of unprecedented peace, But that architecture, designed to prevent war, is now preventing adaptation. The EU has 27 member states, each with veto power on key issues. The European Commission has more regulatory authority than democratic accountability. The European Parliament exists but has limited actual power, and the whole system moves at the speed of the slowest, most risk-averse member state. When the Ukraine war erupted, the US pivoted to domestic LNG exports and energy diplomacy within weeks. Europe spent months debating committee structures and environmental impact assessments. When the 2022 energy crisis hit, America approved new pipeline infrastructure and production permits. Europe held stakeholder consultations and referendums on nuclear power while factories shut down and citizens froze through winter. This isn't about intelligence or intentions. European policymakers are sophisticated, well-educated, thoughtful, but they're operating within a system that was optimized for stability, not dynamism. For consensus, not speed. For preventing the last crisis, not adapting to the next one. And here's the geopolitical irony. While Europe built institutions to constrain power, China and America built systems to project it. Now Europe finds itself economically dependent on China for manufacturing and on America for security, with diminishing leverage over either. If this is the first time you've heard this side of the story, you might want to stick around. Because what comes next is where the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Let's talk about the decision that historians will study for decades. Europe's energy suicide. Germany, in a fit of post-Fukushima panic and green romanticism, decided to phase out nuclear power, one of the cleanest, most reliable baseload energy sources ever created. Simultaneously, they doubled down on Russian natural gas while building massive solar and wind infrastructure that depends on gas plants for backup when the sun doesn't shine and wind doesn't blow. The result? Europe's electricity costs are now 2 to 3 times higher than America's. Industrial users in Germany pay around €200 per megawatt hour. In Texas, $30 to $50. That's not a marginal difference. That's, do we keep our factory here or move it difference. France, which kept its nuclear fleet, is doing better. But even France is watching its heavy industry consider relocation. ArcelorMittal, Europe's largest steelmaker, is cutting production. Aluminum smelters are shutting down because they can't compete when energy is 70% of their cost structure. Meanwhile, America achieved energy independence through fracking. Yes, fracking. The thing European environmentalists successfully banned in most countries. The US is now the world's largest oil and gas producer, a net energy exporter, and has electricity prices that make industrial production competitive. But here's the layer most people miss. This isn't just about cost, it's about optionality. When you control your own energy, you have geopolitical options. When you depend on imports from Russia, Qatar, and Algeria, you have constraints. Europe traded sovereignty for a green aesthetic, and is now discovering that sovereignty matters when the world gets dangerous. Europe's best and brightest are leaving, not in a trickle, in an accelerating wave. Tech talent moves to America where salaries are 2 to 3 times higher and equity compensation actually means something. Researchers follow funding to US universities and biotech hubs. Entrepreneurs build companies and ecosystems with actual venture capital and exit opportunities. In 2022, European venture capital investment was $85 billion. In America, $238 billion. For a continent with comparable population and GDP, that gap is catastrophic. It means the next generation of transformative companies, the Googles, Amazons, OpenAIs, won't be European. They'll be American or Chinese. Europe's response? More regulation. GDPR, the Digital Services Act, the AI Act, each well-intentioned. Each adding compliance costs that hurt startups more than giants. Each cementing Europe's position as a rule maker in a world where rule breakers win. The pattern is brutal. Europe trains talent, America monetizes it. Europe invents technologies, see BioNTech's mRNA platform. America scales them into empire. Europe regulates, America iterates. And the feedback loop accelerates. As talent leaves, investment follows. As investment dries up, more talent leaves. The Atlantic brain drain is becoming an Atlantic brain hemorrhage. Here's something most analysis completely misses. The euro itself is a structural trap that makes everything worse. When you're an independent country with your own currency, you have a release valve. Economy in recession, devalue currency, boost exports, attract investment. It's not ideal, but it's an option. But Greece can't devalue the euro. Neither can Italy, Spain, or Portugal. They're locked in a currency union with Germany, whose economy is structured completely differently. Germany runs surpluses, exports premium manufactured goods, and benefits from a euro that's weaker than the Deutsche Mark would be. Southern Europe bleeds competitiveness, can't adjust through currency, and is forced into permanent austerity just to stay in the system. The alternative, breaking up the euro, is politically unthinkable and economically catastrophic. So Europe is trapped in a system that amplifies divergence while preventing adjustment. Compare this to America. Texas and Mississippi use the same dollar, but they're part of a genuine fiscal union with federal transfers, labor mobility, and integrated capital markets. The EU has none of those things at scale. It's a currency union without a fiscal union. What economists warned from the beginning was unsustainable. This isn't a theory. It's unfolding in real time. Italy's 10-year bond yields are 175 basis points above Germany's. That spread is a market signal. Investors don't believe these are equivalent risks despite the shared currency. They're pricing in either perpetual bailouts or eventual rupture. Let's get geopolitical. If Europe continues its relative decline, who wins? China, obviously. Europe is becoming a captive market for Chinese EVs, solar panels, and increasingly sophisticated manufactured goods. BYD is eating Volkswagen's lunch. Contemporary Amperex technology dominates European battery supply chains. The port of Piraeus in Greece is Chinese-owned. So are chunks of Italian infrastructure, Serbian copper mines, and Hungarian battery factories. China is executing a playbook: buy distressed European assets, lock in dependencies, and wait for geopolitical realignment. When Europe is economically tethered to Beijing, NATO becomes a paper tiger. You can't sanction your largest trading partner without destroying yourself. America wins and loses. Wins because European capital flight flows to US markets, European talent moves to American cities, and dollar dominance strengthens. Loses because a weak Europe can't contain Russia, can't balance China, and forces America to extend its security umbrella over an increasingly fragile alliance structure. Russia wins. A fragmented, economically declining Europe is far easier to manipulate than a strong, unified one. Energy dependence becomes political leverage. Far-right and far-left parties, many with opaque connections to Moscow, gain ground on promises to restore sovereignty and economic prosperity. But here's the darkest pattern. Everyone assumes Europe's decline is reversible with the right policies. What if it's not? What if the combination of demographics, debt, institutional paralysis, energy constraints, and geopolitical vulnerability has created a doom loop that no amount of policy reform can escape? What if we're not watching a crisis but a transition from the European century to something else entirely? So why is America, despite all its chaos and dysfunction, more resilient? Demographics. America is younger, with a fertility rate closer to replacement and immigration that, while contentious, still attracts global talent. Every major tech company, from Google to OpenAI, was founded by or heavily staffed by immigrants. Energy. America is energy independent with diversified sources: oil, gas, nuclear, renewables. Europe depends on imports it can't control. Dollar dominance. The world's reserve currency gives America options Europe doesn't have. Capital flight goes to dollars, not from them. Economic flexibility. American labor markets are more dynamic, business formation is easier, bankruptcy isn't a permanent stigma, and capital moves faster. Europe optimized for worker protection, America optimized for creative destruction. Scale. The United States is a genuine single market of 335 million people with integrated supply chains, uniform regulations, and capital mobility. Europe is 27 countries with different languages, regulations, and cultures pretending to be one economy. Innovation culture. Silicon Valley, Boston biotech, Austin startups. America has ecosystems that reward risk-taking. Europe has ecosystems that reward compliance. None of this means America is without massive problems. Inequality, polarization, infrastructure decay, fiscal trajectories, all real. But America's problems are arguably more solvable than Europe's because they're political, not structural. Europe's problems are embedded in the architecture itself. So here we are. Europe, the continent that dominated global affairs for 500 years, that rebuilt itself into a social democratic paradise after World War II, that was supposed to represent the end of history, is now entering what might be irreversible relative decline. Not collapse, not chaos. Just a slow, grinding loss of relevance and prosperity, while other powers rise and capital flows elsewhere. The signs are everywhere if you know how to read them. Crumbling industrial base, demographic winter, institutional paralysis, energy dependence, capital flight, brain drain, currency trap, geopolitical fragmentation, and the hidden reason, the one that connects all these threads, is this. Europe built institutions for the world that was, not the world that is. It optimized for preventing war when the real threat became economic irrelevance. It built consensus-based governance when the world rewards speed. It created welfare states for aging populations when demographics were young. It assumed American security guarantees were permanent when America increasingly looks inward. The tragedy is that every individual decision was rational. Every compromise made sense in isolation. But together, they created a system that cannot adapt fast enough to survive in a world of great power competition and rapid technological change. So ask yourself, are we watching the quiet collapse of a continent? Or is this just another chapter in Europe's long history of crisis and renewal? I don't have that answer yet. But I know this. If you're not paying attention to Europe's trajectory, you're missing one of the most consequential stories of our time. Because what happens to Europe will shape everything. From where capital flows, to where wars get fought, to whether the American-led international order survives the 21st century. If this connected dots you hadn't seen connected before, we go deeper every week about all sorts of financial stories. Hit subscribe. Because the patterns emerging now will define the world your children inherit. And that's not hyperbole. That's just what happens when empires, even peaceful bureaucratic ones, enter their twilight. The question is whether anyone notices before it's too late.